Hi, I'm John, and this is an Omnibus Ultra Ichibansho Majin Vegeta figure. And the more I look at it, the more disappointed I get at it, especially around his eyes with his thick eyeliner. But I see potential. And more importantly, my cousin and his wife just bought a new house, and one of their favorite characters is Majin Vegeta, so I'm going to repaint it and give it to them as a housewarming present. So, let's go. As usual, to start, I have to take it apart, so it's time to make some veggie soup. After letting it sit in boiled water for a while and a little bit of elbow grease, this is the best I could do to take it apart. Next, I'm going to need some masking tape. Similar to my other Vegeta videos, I'm not going to be repainting the gloves and boots as a whole, but we'll still be adding in some detail later, so I'm using this masking tape to protect it so I can haphazardly paint the other areas. Now that that's out of the way, it's prime time. I'm using Army Painter primers this time around, using black on his bodysuit and gray on his skin sections. While priming the faceplate, I was surprised to see that the eyeliner was actually sculpted into the eyes, but I think the original paint application just sort of missed the mark. After all the pieces dried, I decided to work on the bodysuit first. For this, I used a mix of flat blue, black, and stonewall gray. I really like working with Vallejo blues because they seem to go on really easily in one coat. And the fact that Buu Saga Vegeta only wears a solid blue jumpsuit makes this really just fantastic. Next, to base coat the skin sections, I mixed together some brown rose and dark skin tone. I found this to be a really good color for shading and undertones for the skin, as a little bit of redness comes through when painting in the lighter tones, similar to how blood sits underneath our skin. After painting the little skin sections and the rips of his clothing, I went back to start adding highlights in his jumpsuits using some azure and royal blue. I start my dry brushing by hitting the highest raised areas while my brush has the most amount of paint on it, and then slowly blending in the darker areas. After seeing how the highlights turned out, I didn't like how vibrant the blue on the jumpsuit looked. Apparently royal blue is just a bit too royal for this Saiyan Prince. So I added an additional layer of highlights using some flat blue, azure, and stonewall gray to sort of mute the vibrance of the previous layer. Next, jumping back to the skin, I started by painting in his eyes using some white and flow improver. Then I started adding in highlights of his skin using a mix of basic skin tone and a bit of flat flesh, since basic skin tone by itself is a bit too pale for Vegeta. But again, I misjudged Vegeta's coloring here, and even after adding in flat flesh to the mix, he was still too pale. So I added an additional layer of highlights using some basic skin tone and sunny skin tone, which is a bit yellower in tone and matches him quite well. Next, to work on his eyes, I started by adding his highlighter back using some black and flow improver. I followed the sculpt lines exactly, and if I compare it back to the original figure, it really was just some bad paint application. Next, I used a ball stylus with some black paint to paint in his eyeballs. Then I painted in his eyebrows using some yellow ochre and deep yellow, then painted in his irises using a mix of emerald and white, leaving a bit of the black at the edges to serve as an outline, similar to what I did with Gogeta. And as usual, just to add a final touch to the eyes, I added a small white dot along the edge of the irises to give it a little extra depth. Usually I would call it a day right there, but since this is Majin Vegeta, I have to slap a big M on his forehead, and I'm deathly afraid of writing letters on figures and fear ruining them. So I had the bright idea of clear coating the face in high gloss so I can easily wipe off any errors I make along the way using some paint thinner without doing any harm to the paint job underneath. I then proceeded to draw the M on there, making mistakes along the way and cleaning up with a pointed Q-tip, and rinse and repeat until I thought I had something good enough. Then I quickly painted on a gloss coat on top of the M to seal the paint in to make sure I don't damage it when I add in the panel liners later. Next, I forgot all about the hair. I didn't even prime it. It ended up working out anyway since I feel like yellow doesn't really cover that well, and it makes me think that I should probably buy some yellow primer in the future, if that exists. Anyway, the colors I'm using here are the same as the eyebrows, a mix of deep yellow and yellow ochre. Next, to add in the highlights, I mixed together some lemon yellow and white and dry brushed along the hard edges and tips of his hair, and did another pass on just the tips to make the brighter yellow stand out. With all the paint work out of the way, it was time to rip off the tape. And time for my favorite part, the panel liners. I used gray panel liners on all of the creases and stitching of his gloves and boots, as well as using it inappropriately as some shading in his knuckles and the folds of his boots. Then on all the skin sections, I used pink brown panel liner, particularly in his muscles and the vein lines. Then on his face, I used some brown panel liners in the eyebrow ridges, under his eyes, the wrinkles in his nose, and his mouth. While I was at it, I also used some brown in the tips of his boots. Next, I cleaned up all of my messy lines using some X20 enamel thinner and some pointed Q-tips. The last thing to do was to make sure that all of my paintwork was sealed in by spraying on a matte clear coat on it. Somehow, when I was about to spray the hair, I picked up the wrong spray and sprayed a bit of primer on instead. So off screen, I completely redid the hair and then sprayed a clear coat on it. After that dried, all that was left was to put it back together. And he's done. Here's how he looked before. And here's the final product. Overall, I think it's a huge improvement. I think if I just fix the eyeliner on the Majin Vegeta by itself, the figure itself rises up the rank, but I think that giving him the full treatment is deserved since he's going to be a gift. Let me know what you think in the comments, and drop any ideas that you may want to see in the future. Some of them have already caught my eyes for sure. Of course, special thanks to my members, my newest being Saiyan Sales on my YouTube membership. I posted progress photos of this and my other projects while I work on them, so if you want, check it out on YouTube at buymeacoffee.com for $2 a month to help support the channel directly. If you want to support the channel but with no cost to you, check out my Amazon storefront for everything I use in this video, plus a bunch of other items from other videos. Everything I use in this video is also listed in the description as Amazon affiliate links, and if you buy anything from them, I get a little bit of kickback from Amazon. But of course, most importantly, if you like this video, leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Alright. Okie dokes, time to pack them up. And he's done.